For 15 years, I didn't hear my daughter's voice. Not on my birthday, not on Christmas, not even on the anniversary of the day we lost her father. Every year, I mailed her a birthday card with the same message: I love you. My door is always open. Every year, the cards went unanswered. People told me to move on. They said, if she wanted you in her life, she would call. But a mother's heart doesn't stop loving her child just because the phone stops ringing. I kept hoping. Then, one rainy evening, as I sat alone knitting by the living room window, my phone rang. I almost ignored it. When I looked at the screen, my hands began to shake. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen in 15 years. Emily, my daughter. With trembling fingers, I answered. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard a voice I thought I might never hear again. Mom. She was crying. I don't know who else to call. In that moment, 15 years of anger, heartbreak, and unanswered questions disappeared. She wasn't calling to explain the past. She was calling because she needed her mother. I grabbed my car keys without asking a single question. No matter what had happened between us, she was still my daughter, and I was still her mother. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to see our amazing viewers from around the world. My name is Margaret Wilson, and if there's one thing I've learned in 70 years of life, it's that love doesn't always protect you from heartbreak. Sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. But before my daughter stopped speaking to me for 15 years, we were inseparable. Emily wasn't just my daughter. She was my best friend. She came into the world on a warm spring morning with a full head of dark hair and the loudest cry the nurses had ever heard. The moment the doctor placed her in my arms, I looked into her tiny blue eyes and whispered, I'll love you for the rest of my life. It was a promise I never broke. My husband Thomas was the happiest man alive when Emily was born. He carried her everywhere, read bedtime stories every night, and somehow convinced her that pancakes tasted better when shaped like animals. Our little house wasn't fancy. The roof leaked whenever it rained, and the kitchen was so small that only one person could cook at a time. But it was filled with laughter. Every Friday night became family movie night. Thomas would make popcorn while Emily built blanket forts across the living room. We'd squeeze together on the old couch, watching the same movies over and over until Emily fell asleep in her father's arms. Those are the memories I still treasure. Emily was always curious. She asked hundreds of questions every day. Why do birds fly? Why does it rain? Why do people get sick? Thomas would laugh. I think we have a future scientist. By the time she turned 10, Emily had already decided she wanted to become a doctor. I want to help people, she told us proudly. Thomas kissed the top of her head. And you will. He believed in her more than anyone. I did too. As she grew older, Emily remained kind and hardworking. She volunteered at the local library, helped elderly neighbors carry groceries, and spent weekends reading medical books far beyond her grade level. Sometimes I'd find her sitting on the porch with Thomas, asking him about life. He always had time for her. Watching the two of them together filled my heart with peace. I truly believed our little family would stay this happy forever. But life has a way of changing everything without warning. One cold November afternoon, Thomas called me from work. I don't feel very well. You should come home, I said. I think I will. He never made it. On his drive home, he suffered a massive heart attack. The doctors did everything they could, but by the time Emily and I reached the hospital, he was gone. I still remember Emily's scream when the doctor told us. It echoed through the hallway like a sound no mother should ever hear. She collapsed into my arms. Dad can't leave us. He promised he'd always be here. I had no words, because he had made the same promise to me. The weeks after the funeral passed in a blur. Bills piled up on the kitchen table. The mortgage payments didn't stop. The electricity still had to be paid, and college was only a few years away for Emily. I knew I had only one choice. I had to keep our family afloat. I found a second job cleaning offices at night after spending my days working as a receptionist at a medical clinic. Some mornings I left home before sunrise. Some nights I didn't return until Emily was already asleep. It broke my heart every single time. One evening, I quietly opened the front door after working nearly 16 hours. Emily was sitting alone at the dining table. Her homework lay untouched. I waited for you, she said softly. I looked at the clock. It was almost 10 at night. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Work ran late. She forced a smile. It's okay, but I could tell it wasn't. The next morning, I found a note she'd left on the refrigerator. Good luck at work, Mom. I made my own breakfast. Love you. I stood in the kitchen and cried. She was only 13 years old. She shouldn't have been taking care of herself. She should have still had both of her parents. From that day on, guilt became my constant companion. Every overtime shift I accepted helped pay the bills. But every hour I spent away from home felt like another piece of my relationship with Emily slipping away. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just until we got back on our feet. Just until life became easier. I didn't realize that while I was working to protect our future, my daughter was quietly beginning to believe I had chosen my job over her. Neither of us knew it then. But the distance growing between us would soon become far greater than either of us could imagine. The years after Thomas's death passed faster than I expected. Every morning began the same way. My alarm rang at 5 o'clock. I quietly got dressed so I wouldn't wake Emily, made breakfast, packed her lunch, and left a handwritten note beside her plate. Some mornings it said, "Have a wonderful day, I love you." Other mornings it simply read, "I'll be home as soon as I can." I hope those little notes reminded her that, even when I wasn't there, she was always in my heart. But love written on paper could never replace a mother's presence. I worked 2 jobs almost every day. At the medical clinic, I answered phones, scheduled appointments, and greeted patients with a smile. When my shift ended, I hurried across town to clean office buildings until late at night. By the time I got home, the neighborhood was usually asleep. Some nights I found Emily already in bed. Other nights she pretended to be asleep because she was tired of waiting for me. One Friday afternoon, I rushed home early. For the first time in months, I had managed to leave work before sunset. I walked through the front door carrying pizza and Emily's favorite chocolate ice cream. "I have a surprise," I called happily. There was no answer. I found a note on the kitchen table. "I'm at Sarah's house. We had a school project. Don't wait up." I looked around the quiet house. The pizza grew cold on the counter. The ice cream slowly melted. I sat alone at the kitchen table and cried. It wasn't because Emily had gone to a friend's house. It was because I realized she had stopped expecting me to be home. A few weeks later, I attended her parent-teacher conference. Her biology teacher smiled warmly. "Emily is one of the brightest students I've ever taught." My heart filled with pride. "But," the teacher continued carefully, "she seems lonely," I frowned. "What do you mean? She keeps to herself. When the other students talk about family dinners or vacations, she stays quiet." One day she told me, "My mom is always working. She doesn't have time." Those words hit me harder than anything else that day. She didn't know why I worked so much. She only knew I wasn't there. That evening, I decided things had to change. I knocked on her bedroom door. "Can we talk?" She looked up from her homework. "Sure." I sat beside her on the bed. "I'm sorry I haven't been around as much." She shrugged without looking at me. "It's fine." "No, it isn't. I know you've been spending a lot of time alone." She closed her notebook. "You don't have to explain. I understand." Her calm voice hurt even more than anger would have. "What do you understand?" I asked softly. "That work is more important." I felt tears fill my eyes. "Emily, no." She stood up. "I get it. You have bills. You have responsibilities. I know Dad's gone. But sometimes..." Her voice cracked. "I feel like I lost both my parents." The room became painfully silent. I reached for her hand. She stepped back. "I've missed every school play, every soccer game, every award ceremony. I always looked into the audience hoping you'd be there. But your chair stayed empty." Every word pierced my heart. I wanted to tell her about the unpaid bills hidden in the kitchen drawer, about the nights I skipped dinner so she could have everything she needed, about the exhaustion that made my body ache every morning. But I knew none of that mattered to a 14-year-old girl. She didn't need money. She needed her mother. "I'm trying my best," I whispered. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "I know, but sometimes I wish your best included me." She quietly walked into her bedroom and closed the door. I stood alone in the hallway for a long time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our conversation over and over. The next morning, I asked my manager if I could reduce my hours at the clinic. He looked at me sympathetically. "I wish I could help, but we're already short-staffed." My evening cleaning job wasn't any different. If I worked less, I wouldn't earn enough to keep the house. I felt trapped. No matter what I chose, someone I loved would suffer. Months passed, and the distance between Emily and me continued to grow. She spent more time with friends. She stopped telling me about school. Our conversations became shorter. Our hugs became rarer. One evening, as I watched her laughing on the phone with someone, I realized I no longer knew what was happening in her life. The little girl who once told me everything had become a stranger living under the same roof. I blamed myself every single day. I kept believing that once life became easier, we would find our way back to each other. I didn't realize that while I was waiting for the right time, someone else was about to enter my daughter's life. Someone who would slowly convince her that I wasn't the mother she deserved. And that misunderstanding would soon tear our family apart. By the time Emily graduated from high school, the distance between us had become impossible to ignore. We still lived in the same house. We still ate dinner at the same table whenever our schedules allowed, but it no longer felt like we were sharing our lives. Our conversations were polite, short, and careful. The laughter that once filled our home had disappeared. I kept telling myself that this was just a phase. Teenagers needed space. Eventually, things would get better. I wanted to believe that. After graduation, Emily enrolled in a local college while working part-time at a bookstore. I was proud of her. She had earned scholarships through years of hard work, and I hoped college would be a fresh start for both of us. Then, one evening, she came home with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Mom," she said excitedly, "I'd like you to meet someone." A tall young man stepped into the living room. "This is Jason." He was polite, well-dressed, and charming. He shook my hand firmly and smiled. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Wilson." "It's nice to meet you too," I replied. At first I thought he seemed respectful, but over the next few months, little things began to worry me. Whenever Emily and I were talking, Jason would interrupt and answer for her. If I suggested the three of us have dinner together, he always had another plan. Slowly, Emily spent less and less time at home. One Sunday afternoon, I invited them both for lunch. While I was setting the table, I overheard Jason speaking to Emily in the hallway. "You don't have to explain everything to your mother. We're adults." Emily didn't answer. When they left that afternoon, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my heart. A few weeks later, Emily missed her cousin's birthday party. She had promised to come. When I called to check on her, she answered with a tired voice. "Jason wanted to spend the day together." "I understand," I said, but deep inside, I knew something wasn't right. The Emily I had raised always kept her promises. One evening, she came home wearing a long-sleeved sweater even though it was the middle of summer. As she reached for a glass in the kitchen, her sleeve slipped back. I noticed dark bruises on her wrist. My heart stopped. "Emily." She quickly pulled her sleeve down. "What happened?" I bumped into a door. The answer came too quickly. I looked into her eyes. She couldn't meet mine. That night, I barely slept. The next afternoon, I asked her if we could go for a walk together. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said quietly, "I'm worried about you." She sighed. "Mom, Jason isn't a bad person. I didn't say he was. But I see changes in you. You've stopped seeing your friends. You hardly visit family. And now you have bruises." She stopped walking. "You don't know him." "I know what I see." Her expression changed immediately. "So now you're judging him. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection." Her voice echoed through the quiet park. People turned to look. "I've spent my whole life waiting for you to notice me. And now that I'm happy, you suddenly want to be involved." Those words hit me like a knife. "Emily, that's not fair, isn't it? You missed birthdays. You missed school plays. You missed everything. And now you think you get to tell me how to live?" Tears filled my eyes. "I worked every day to give you a future. I never stopped loving you." She laughed bitterly. "Love, if that's what you call it. I call it being alone." I reached for her hand. She stepped back. "For once in my life, someone chooses me first. You never did." I felt my heart breaking. "You have no idea how many sacrifices I made. Then maybe you should have been there instead." She turned and walked away. I stood there crying, unable to move. 2 days later, I came home from work and found her bedroom half empty. Closet doors stood open. Drawers had been cleared. A single envelope rested on her bed. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "Mom, I'm moving in with Jason. Please don't try to stop me. I need to live my own life. Maybe one day you'll understand. Emily." I collapsed onto her bed, clutching the letter to my chest. The house suddenly felt unbearably quiet. That evening, I called her phone. No answer. I left a voicemail. "Emily, I love you. Please just let me know you're safe." She never called back. The next morning, I sent a text. No reply. By the end of the week, I realized she had blocked my number. As I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by memories of the little girl who once ran into my arms after school every day, I whispered through my tears, "I'll never stop waiting for you." I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of 15 long years of silence. 15 birthdays without a phone call. 15 Christmas mornings with an empty chair at my table. 15 years of hoping that one day, somehow, my daughter would find her way home. The first Christmas without Emily was the hardest day of my life. For 22 years, she had been the reason our home felt alive. Every December, she insisted on decorating the Christmas tree while singing holiday songs completely off-key. She always placed the star on top, even when she was too small and Thomas had to lift her onto his shoulders. That year, I decorated the tree alone. I still hung her favorite handmade ornaments. I still placed her stocking above the fireplace. I even wrapped a small present with her name on it. Deep down, I knew she wasn't coming, but a mother's heart refuses to stop hoping. On Christmas morning, I made pancakes shaped like snowmen, just as Thomas used to do. 3 plates sat on the table, one for me, one for Thomas, whose memory never left our home, and one for Emily. The third plate stayed untouched. After breakfast, I packed the gift into my car and drove to the apartment where Emily had moved with Jason. I didn't want to disturb her. I only wanted to leave the present at the door. When I arrived, I quietly placed the gift on the welcome mat with a handwritten card. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I love you, Mom." The next morning, I drove past the apartment on my way to work. The gift was gone. For one beautiful moment, I smiled. Then I noticed the card lying in the trash beside the building. Someone had thrown it away. I pulled over and picked it up. The paper was soaked from the rain. The words "I love you" had blurred into the ink. I sat in my car and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. The years continued to pass. Every birthday, I mailed Emily a card. Every Christmas, I sent a small gift. Every Mother's Day, I hoped the phone would ring. It never did. Friends gently encouraged me to stop trying. "Margaret," one of them said kindly, "you're only hurting yourself." But how could I stop? She wasn't just someone I used to know. She was my daughter. One spring afternoon, I walked into a small bookstore and froze. Emily was standing only a few feet away. For a moment, I couldn't believe my eyes. She looked older, more tired, but she was still my little girl. My heart raced as I slowly walked toward her. "Emily?" She turned. Our eyes met. For just a second, I thought she might smile. Instead, her face became expressionless. "Hi," she said quietly. "I've missed you so much," I whispered. "I've written to you every month." She looked away. "I know. You got the letters?" She nodded once. "Every one." Hope rushed through me. "Then why didn't you answer?" Before she could respond, Jason appeared from another aisle carrying a stack of books. He looked at me coldly. "We're leaving." I tried to speak. "I just want 5 minutes with my daughter." Emily lowered her eyes. "I have to go." As they walked away, I called after her. "I love you." She never looked back. That night, I sat at the kitchen table holding the unopened birthday card I had planned to mail her the following week. For the first time in years, I wondered if I should stop sending them. Then I remembered the promise I had whispered when she was born. "I'll love you for the rest of my life." Promises like that don't have an expiration date. So I mailed the card, and the next one, and the one after that. 15 birthdays came and went. My hair turned gray. My hands became wrinkled. The little house grew quieter every year. Sometimes I walked past Emily's old bedroom and gently opened the door. I had never changed it. Her childhood trophies still stood on the shelf. Her favorite books remained beside the bed. Even the faded height marks we had drawn on the bedroom wall were still there. People told me it wasn't healthy to keep the room the same. Maybe they were right, but changing it felt like giving up, and I wasn't ready to do that. One rainy evening, exactly 15 years after she had walked out of my life, I sat by the living room window knitting a baby blanket for the church charity drive. The house was silent except for the rain tapping against the glass. Then my phone rang. I glanced at the screen without thinking. The knitting needles slipped from my hands. My heart nearly stopped. One name appeared on the display: Emily. For 15 years, I had dreamed about seeing that name again. Now that it was happening, I was almost too afraid to answer. With trembling hands and tears already filling my eyes, I pressed the green button. "Hello?" There was only silence. Then I heard a voice I thought I might never hear again. "Mom." She was crying. I need you." In that single moment, 15 years of heartbreak disappeared. She wasn't calling to reopen old arguments. She wasn't calling to explain the past. She was calling because she needed her mother. And before she could say another word, I had already reached for my car keys. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my car keys. For 15 years, I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. Sometimes I dreamed Emily would call to apologize. Sometimes I imagined she had started a family and wanted me to meet my grandchildren. Sometimes I pictured us laughing together as though the lost years had never happened. But the voice I heard on the phone wasn't happy. It was terrified. "Mom," she whispered through sobs. "Please, can you come?" "I'm coming," I said immediately. "Tell me where you are." She gave me an address on the other side of town. Before I could ask another question, the line went dead. I called back. No answer. My heart raced as I hurried to my car. Rain poured from the dark sky, making it difficult to see the road, but nothing could have stopped me that night. Every red light felt endless. Every minute felt like an hour. As I drove, memories flooded my mind. Emily learning to ride a bicycle. Emily blowing out birthday candles. Emily crying at her father's funeral. Emily walking out of our house with a suitcase. I whispered the same prayer over and over. Please let her be safe. 25 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a small apartment building. The place looked old and neglected. Several windows were broken. The hallway lights flickered. I hurried upstairs until I found apartment 12B. Before I could knock, the door slowly opened. Emily stood there. For a moment, I barely recognized her. The bright, confident young woman I remembered was gone. She looked thin, exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. A fading bruise marked her cheek. My heart broke. Without thinking, I wrapped my arms around her. She froze. Then, after a few seconds, she began crying harder than I had ever heard anyone cry. "I'm sorry," she kept repeating. "I'm so sorry." I held her tightly. "You don't have to say anything right now. I'm here." She buried her face against my shoulder exactly as she had done when she was a little girl. For the first time in 15 years, I was holding my daughter again. When we finally stepped inside, I looked around the apartment. Furniture was broken. Several dishes sat untouched in the sink. The living room was almost empty. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a prison. Emily noticed me looking. "I know," she whispered. "It's gotten bad." I gently took her hands. "What happened?" She looked down at the floor. "I should have listened to you." Tears filled her eyes again. "You tried to warn me. I thought you were trying to control my life." She sat on the couch, trembling. "Jason wasn't like this at first. He was kind. He made me feel special, but after we got married, everything changed." She described years of emotional abuse. Jason controlled the money. He isolated her from friends. He criticized everything she did. He convinced her that no one loved her except him. Whenever she talked about contacting me, he reminded her of our last argument. He kept saying, "Your mother doesn't want you anymore." My chest tightened with pain. "Emily, I never stopped wanting you." She covered her face with her hands. "I know that now." Every letter. I looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" She stood and walked into the bedroom. A moment later, she returned carrying a worn cardboard box. Inside were dozens of birthday cards, Christmas cards, photographs, letters. Every single one I had ever sent. "I kept them," she whispered. "I read them over and over." I stared at the box in disbelief. "I thought you threw them away." She shook her head. "No, Jason told me to, but I couldn't. They were the only proof that someone still loved me." I couldn't stop crying. All those years, I believed my words had never reached her. But she had read every letter, every message, every reminder that I loved her. She had simply been too trapped to answer. Then she looked at me with fear in her eyes. "Mom, he's coming home soon." I understood immediately. "Pack a bag." She hesitated. "What if he finds us?" I stepped closer and held her shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not alone anymore. I'm not leaving you. Not tonight. Not ever again." For the first time in 15 years, Emily nodded with hope instead of fear. Together, we packed a small suitcase. Just as we reached the front door, we heard footsteps climbing the stairs outside. Then came the unmistakable sound of someone trying to unlock the apartment door. Emily's face turned white. She grabbed my arm. "Mom, he's here." And in that terrifying moment, I knew our fight to bring my daughter home had only just begun. Emily's face lost all color. She gripped my arm so tightly that it hurt. "Mom," she whispered, barely able to breathe. "Don't let him see you." The sound of keys rattling outside the apartment grew louder. My heart pounded against my chest. I looked around the tiny apartment, searching for another way out. "There," I whispered, pointing toward the back door that led to a narrow staircase behind the building. Emily shook her head. "He keeps it locked." Before I could respond, we heard Jason's voice from the hallway. "Emily." His tone was sharp and impatient. "I know you're in there." Emily flinched. I had never seen my daughter so frightened. Then something inside me changed. For 15 years, I had blamed myself for losing her. I had cried, prayed, and waited for this moment. I wasn't going to let fear take her away again. I quietly picked up my phone and dialed 911. Keeping my voice low, I gave the operator the address and explained that my daughter was afraid to leave because of her abusive husband. The dispatcher assured me officers were already on their way. Outside, Jason banged on the door. "Open it!" Emily began trembling uncontrollably. I took both of her hands. "Look at me." She slowly lifted her tear-filled eyes. "You are not alone anymore. No matter what happens next, I will never leave you again." She nodded, trying to believe me. Another loud bang shook the door. Suddenly, we heard Jason shouting. Then, police sirens. The hallway became quiet. A few moments later came another voice. "Police department, step away from the door." We heard Jason arguing loudly, but within seconds, his voice faded as officers escorted him away. Only after everything became silent did Emily finally collapse into my arms. She cried harder than she had the night she called me. Years of fear seemed to pour out of her all at once. One of the officers gently knocked before entering. "Ma'am, it's safe now." Emily looked at him nervously. "Is he gone?" "Yes, he won't be coming back tonight." The officers helped us gather a few more belongings before driving us safely to my house. As we pulled into the driveway, Emily stared quietly through the window. "I never thought I'd come back here." I smiled softly. "You never stop belonging here." When she stepped inside, everything looked almost exactly as it had 15 years earlier. The family photographs still covered the walls. Thomas's favorite chair still sat beside the fireplace. And at the end of the hallway, her bedroom door remained closed. She looked at me with surprise. "You kept it?" I nodded. I couldn't bring myself to change it. Slowly, she opened the door. Her old bookshelf was still there. Her childhood quilt still covered the bed. Even the height marks on the wall remained. Emily ran her fingers over the faded pencil lines. "I was 16 here," she whispered. Then she found something tucked inside her old desk drawer, a small notebook. She opened it carefully. Inside were childhood dreams she had written years ago. "I want to become a doctor. I want to help people. I want to make Mom proud." Her tears fell onto the pages. "I forgot this girl." I gently wrapped my arm around her. "No, you just lost her for a while." The next morning, Emily slept nearly 12 hours. When she finally came downstairs, she looked exhausted but peaceful. Over breakfast, neither of us rushed to fill the silence. Some wounds needed time. After eating, she quietly asked, "Mom? Yes? Can I tell you something?" "Always." She stared into her coffee. "For years, I blamed you. I thought work mattered more than I did. I was angry." I listened without interrupting. Jason noticed that. He kept feeding those feelings. "He told me you were happier without me. He said every birthday card was just guilt." I felt tears gathering again. I almost believed him. She reached across the table and held my hand. "But every time I read your letters, I could still hear your voice. They reminded me that somewhere. My mother still loved me." I squeezed her hand gently. "I never stopped. Not for one day." Emily smiled through her tears. "I know." That afternoon, we met with a counselor who specialized in helping survivors of emotional abuse. The counselor explained something that changed both of us. Abuse doesn't always begin with shouting or violence. It often begins with isolation, with making someone doubt themselves, with convincing them they're alone. Emily quietly nodded. That's exactly what happened. For the first time, she understood that leaving hadn't been a sign of weakness. It had taken incredible courage. That evening, we sat together on the front porch watching the sunset. The silence between us no longer felt painful. It felt peaceful. After a while, Emily rested her head on my shoulder, just as she had when she was a little girl. "I've missed this," she whispered. I kissed the top of her head. "So have I." 15 years had been stolen from us. We could never get them back. But as the sun disappeared below the horizon, I realized something beautiful. Our story wasn't ending. It was beginning again. One small step, one conversation, and one day at a time. The weeks after Emily came home were not easy. Many people think that once someone escapes an abusive relationship, life immediately becomes better. The truth is far more complicated. Emily was finally safe. But fear doesn't disappear the moment danger is gone. It lingers. Some mornings, I found her standing at the living room window, nervously watching every car that drove past the house. If the doorbell rang unexpectedly, she jumped. When the phone buzzed, her hands trembled before she looked at the screen. The abuse had ended, but the scars remained. Every morning I made coffee while Emily sat quietly at the kitchen table. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. I learned that healing didn't always need words. Sometimes, simply being together was enough. One afternoon, there was a knock at the front door. Emily immediately froze. Her breathing became faster. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'll answer it." When I opened the door, Detective Laura Bennett stood outside. She had been assigned to Emily's case after Jason's arrest. She smiled warmly. "I just wanted to check on both of you." Over tea, Detective Bennett explained that Jason had been charged with domestic abuse, intimidation, and financial exploitation. "He'll have to appear in court next month." Emily lowered her eyes. "I'm afraid to testify." The detective nodded. "That's completely understandable. But you won't face him alone. We'll be with you every step of the way." After she left, Emily sat silently for a long time. Finally, she looked at me. "What if I can't do it?" I reached across the table and held her hand. "You've already done the hardest part. You asked for help. The rest we'll face together." A few days later, Emily found a part-time job at a local bookstore. It wasn't about the money. It was about rebuilding her confidence. On her first day, she almost turned around and came home. "I don't think I can do this," she admitted. "You can," I said with a smile. "You've survived things much harder than this." That evening, she returned home smiling for the first time in years. "I did it." "I'm proud of you," I said. She laughed softly. "I think I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." As the court date approached, Emily continued attending counseling every week. Slowly, she began understanding something important. None of what had happened was her fault. Jason had carefully isolated her. He had convinced her that she wasn't good enough. He had made her believe she had no one else. But now, those lies were losing their power. The morning of the hearing arrived. Emily wore a simple navy blue dress. She looked nervous, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. As we entered the courthouse, she reached for my hand. "Thank you for coming." I smiled. There was never anywhere else I'd rather be. Inside the courtroom, Jason glanced toward us. For years, that look would have filled Emily with fear. This time, she looked away calmly. She no longer needed his approval. When it was her turn to testify, the courtroom became silent. Emily spoke honestly about the years of manipulation, control, and emotional abuse. She described how he isolated her from friends, how he convinced her that I no longer loved her, how he made her afraid to leave. At one point, her voice began to shake. The judge offered her a moment to rest. Emily took a deep breath and continued. No one deserves to live in fear. I believed I was alone, but I wasn't. My mother never stopped loving me. I felt tears roll down my face. After several hours of testimony, the judge granted Emily a permanent protective order. Jason was also sentenced for the crimes he had committed. As we walked out of the courthouse, Emily looked up at the bright blue sky. Feels strange, she said. What does? I finally feel free. A few weeks later, she asked me if we could visit Thomas's grave. We stood quietly together, placing fresh flowers beside his headstone. Emily gently touched the stone. Dad, I'm sorry it took me so long to come home. Tears filled my eyes. I think he always knew you would. Emily smiled sadly. I hope so. Before leaving, she turned toward me. Mom? Yes? I can't get those 15 years back. No, but I want to make the years we have left together count. I wrapped my arms around her. We'll make beautiful memories, one day at a time. As we walked back to the car, I realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about choosing not to let the past steal your future. For the first time in 15 years, my daughter wasn't walking away from me. She was walking beside me, and that was more than I had ever dared to hope for. 6 months passed after the court case. Life slowly settled into a rhythm neither Emily nor I had believed was possible. The house, once filled with silence and regret, echoed with conversation again. Every morning we shared breakfast together. Every evening we ate dinner at the same kitchen table where years earlier, so many painful misunderstandings had begun. This time we talked. Really talked. One Saturday afternoon, Emily helped me clean the attic. Dust covered everything, and dozens of old boxes had been untouched for years. I forgot how much stuff Dad kept. Emily laughed. So did I replied. As we sorted through old photographs, Christmas decorations, and family keepsakes, I found a faded cardboard box labeled Bills and Work 2008. I almost threw it away. Then something told me to open it. Inside were hundreds of old documents. Past due mortgage notices, electric bills stamped final notice, medical bills from Thomas's hospital stay, pay stubs from both of my jobs, receipts showing every dollar I earned and every dollar I spent trying to keep our little home. Emily quietly picked up one of the papers. She read it slowly, then another, and another. Her smile disappeared. Mom! She looked at me with tears forming in her eyes. You worked 18 hours some days? I nodded. I didn't really have a choice. She found another envelope. Inside were several college brochures with handwritten notes beside them. Save another $50 this week. Emily's tuition comes first. Don't tell her, she'll worry. Emily covered her mouth. You kept all of this. I guess I never had the heart to throw it away. She continued reading. Then she found something I had completely forgotten. A small notebook. It was my personal journal from the years after Thomas died. She looked at me. May I? I hesitated for a moment, then I nodded. If you want. She carefully opened the first page. Today, Emily smiled for the first time since losing her father. I would work 100 jobs if it meant seeing that smile again. A few pages later. Missed her school concert tonight, cried in the parking lot during my break. I hope one day she understands why. Then, skipped dinner again so I could pay for Emily's science camp. She'll never know, and that's okay. Emily couldn't read anymore. She burst into tears. Oh, Mom, I was so wrong. She dropped the journal and threw her arms around me. I thought you didn't choose me. I thought your work mattered more. I held her as she cried. My work never mattered more than you. It was always because of you. She sobbed against my shoulder. I wasted 15 years believing a lie. I gently wiped away her tears. No, you survived 15 difficult years. There's a difference. She shook her head. I should have listened. You tried to tell me. I wouldn't hear you. I smiled sadly. We both made mistakes. I should have found more ways to show you why I was working. She looked into my eyes. But you never stopped loving me. Never. Not for a single second. That evening, we sat on the front porch watching the sunset. For the first time, there were no unanswered questions between us. Only honesty. Emily quietly broke the silence. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you keep my room exactly the same? I smiled. Because every night before I went to bed, I looked inside and imagined you coming home. I wanted you to know you still had a place here. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I always had a home. I just couldn't see it. A few weeks later, Emily made an important decision. She enrolled in community college again. I don't think becoming a doctor is possible anymore, she admitted. Maybe not, I said gently, but dreams can change. They don't have to disappear. After exploring different classes, Emily discovered a passion for counseling and mental health. I want to help women who feel trapped like I did. I smiled proudly. You'll be wonderful, because you truly understand. Months turned into a year. Emily graduated with honors from her counseling program. Watching her walk across the stage, I remembered the frightened young woman who had returned to my doorstep believing her life was over. Now she stood tall, confident, hopeful. After the ceremony, she handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver heart-shaped necklace. Engraved on the back were 6 simple words. Thank you for never giving up. Tears filled my eyes. I'll treasure this forever, she smiled. You already gave me the greatest gift. What was that? You waited. You never stopped believing I'd come home. As we embraced, I realized something beautiful. Time could never return the years we had lost. But love had done something even more powerful. It had given us a second chance. And this time, neither of us intended to waste another single day. 3 years passed faster than either of us expected. Life had become peaceful again. Emily completed her counseling degree and began working at a women's support center, helping survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their lives. Every evening she came home with the same quiet determination I used to see in her father. I can't fix everyone's pain, she told me one night, but I can make sure they don't face it alone. I smiled proudly. That's more than enough. Watching her comfort frightened women reminded me of the little girl who once needed someone to comfort her. Now she had become that person for others. One sunny Saturday morning, Emily invited me to the community center where she worked. I have something special to show you. When we arrived, dozens of families filled the large hall. Children laughed while volunteers served lunch. A banner stretched across the stage. Family Hope Day. Emily stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone. As she spoke, I couldn't stop smiling. Her voice was calm, confident, and full of compassion. There was a time, she began, when I believed asking for help meant I had failed. She looked around the room. Now I know it takes incredible courage. The audience applauded warmly. After the event ended, a young woman approached Emily with tears in her eyes. Because of you, she whispered, I finally left my abusive relationship. Emily hugged her tightly. You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you deserved better. Standing a few feet away, I felt tears roll down my cheeks. My daughter had transformed her deepest pain into hope for others. That evening, Emily surprised me again. She handed me an elegant envelope. Open it. Inside was an invitation. Margaret Wilson's 70th birthday celebration. I looked at her in surprise. You planned this? She smiled. Every detail. I've missed 15 birthdays. I can't get those years back, but I can make this one unforgettable. A week later, family members, old friends, neighbors, and even some of Emily's coworkers gathered in our backyard. The garden was filled with flowers, music, and photographs from every stage of our lives. One wall displayed pictures from Emily's childhood. Another showed new memories we had created since finding each other again. As the evening drew to a close, Emily stepped forward holding a microphone. The crowd became quiet. She looked directly at me. For many years, she said softly, I believed my mother had chosen work instead of me. She paused, wiping away a tear. I was wrong. I didn't understand that every extra shift, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, was another way she said, I love you. I covered my mouth as tears streamed down my face. Emily continued. For 15 years, I refused to answer her calls. I ignored her letters. I convinced myself she had stopped caring. But she never did. Not once. She walked toward me. Mom, I'm so sorry for the years we lost. I can't change the past, but I promise to spend the rest of my life making new memories with you. The entire backyard was silent. Then she reached into her pocket and unfolded an old, faded birthday card. It was the very first card I had mailed after she left home. The edges were worn from being opened so many times. She smiled through her tears. I carried this with me for 15 years, whenever I felt completely alone. I read these words. She looked down at the handwritten message. No matter where life takes you, you will always be my daughter. I will always love you. My door will always be open. Emily gently took my hands. You kept your promise. I almost didn't, but you waited anyway. I could barely speak. I would have waited forever. She embraced me as everyone around us wiped away tears. Later that night, after the guests had gone home, we sat together on the back porch beneath the stars. The same porch where Thomas used to tell Emily stories when she was little. I wish Dad could see us now, Emily whispered. I smiled. I think he can. She looked up at the sky. I hope he's proud. I know he is. She rested her head on my shoulder. Thank you for giving me another chance. I kissed the top of her head. Thank you for coming home. As we sat together in the quiet night, I realized that forgiveness isn't forgetting what happened. It's choosing love over bitterness. It's believing that broken relationships can heal. It's understanding that even after years of silence, one phone call can change everything. And in that peaceful moment, surrounded by memories of the past and hope for the future, I knew our family had finally found its way back to each other. 10 years have passed since the night my phone rang. Sometimes I still think about that rainy evening when I almost ignored the call. If I had let it ring one more time, if I had assumed it was a wrong number, if I had allowed 15 years of hurt to convince me not to answer, our lives might have been very different. Instead, I answered, and one simple word changed everything. Mom. That single word healed a wound I had carried for 15 years. Today, I am 80 years old. My hands are more wrinkled than they once were. My hair is completely white. I move a little slower now, but my heart has never felt lighter. Emily visits me almost every day. Sometimes she brings homemade soup. Sometimes she brings flowers from her garden. Sometimes she brings nothing at all except herself. And honestly, that's my favorite gift. The little house that once echoed with loneliness is full of life again. The kitchen table where I used to sit alone now holds family dinners every Sunday. Laughter fills every room. Photographs continue covering the walls, but there are so many new ones now that we've almost run out of space. One picture always makes me smile. It's a photograph of Emily holding the hand of a little girl with curly brown hair and bright blue eyes. My granddaughter. Her name is Grace. The first time Emily placed Grace in my arms, she whispered something I'll never forget. Mom, I finally understand. I looked down at the tiny baby sleeping peacefully. What do you mean? Emily smiled through happy tears. Now that I'm a mother, I understand why you never gave up on me. I couldn't speak. For years, I had dreamed of hearing those words, not because I wanted to be proven right, but because I wanted my daughter to know how deeply she had always been loved. Grace quickly became the light of our family. Every Saturday morning, she came to my house wearing tiny rain boots, even when the sun was shining. Grandma, she would shout before running into my arms. We baked cookies together. We planted flowers in the garden. We read bedtime stories whenever she stayed the night. One afternoon, while we were making chocolate chip cookies, Grace looked up at me with serious eyes. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart. Mom says you're the strongest person she knows. I laughed softly. I'm not sure that's true. Grace tilted her head. Then why does she say it? Before I could answer, Emily walked into the kitchen carrying a tray of lemonade. Because, she said gently, your grandma taught me what unconditional love looks like. She sat beside me. There were years when I gave her every reason to stop loving me. But she never did. Grace listened carefully. So, love means you don't quit? Emily smiled. Exactly. I wrapped my arm around both of them. And love also means forgiving. Several months later, Emily invited me to attend a special event at the counseling center where she worked. She had been chosen to receive an award for her dedication to helping survivors rebuild their lives. The room was filled with counselors, families, community leaders, and many women whose lives she had touched. When Emily stepped onto the stage, the applause lasted nearly a full minute. She accepted the award with tears in her eyes. Then she surprised everyone. I wouldn't be standing here today without one person. She looked directly at me. My mother. The audience turned toward where I was sitting. Emily continued speaking. There was a time when I believed my mother had chosen work instead of me. I carried that misunderstanding for 15 years. But the truth was very different. She worked herself to exhaustion so I could have food, a home, and a future. I judged her before I understood her sacrifices. Her voice trembled. I lost 15 years because I believed anger instead of love. She paused for a moment. If your parents are still in your life, call them. If you stop speaking over pride or misunderstandings, don't wait. Time is precious. You never know how much can be lost while you're waiting for the perfect moment. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the ceremony ended, dozens of people came to hug us. One elderly man quietly took my hand. My daughter and I haven't spoken in 8 years. He swallowed hard. I think it's time I called her. I smiled. I hope you do. On the drive home, Emily looked out the window at the setting sun. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending the past never happened. And now, she smiled. Now I know forgiveness means refusing to let yesterday steal tomorrow. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Her father would have been so proud of the woman she had become. Not because she was successful, not because she received awards, but because she chose kindness after experiencing pain. That takes real courage. As I sit here today writing these memories, I realize our story was never really about 15 years of silence. It was about the power of a mother's love. People often ask me how I managed to keep sending birthday cards for so many years without receiving a single reply. The answer is simple. I wasn't sending the cards because I expected something in return. I sent them because she was my daughter. Love doesn't keep score. Love doesn't set deadlines. Love doesn't disappear when it's ignored. Real love waits. Real love hopes. Real love keeps the porch light on, even when no one seems to be coming home. If you've been hurt by someone you love, I won't tell you that forgiveness is easy. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes incredible courage. And sometimes reconciliation isn't possible. But if there is still a chance to speak with someone you love, don't let pride steal tomorrow. Make the call. Write the letter. Say the words you've been holding back. Life is far too short to spend it counting old wounds. Spend it creating new memories instead. Before I finish my story, I want to leave you with the same lesson my daughter now shares with every family she helps. Never assume silence means someone has stopped loving you. Sometimes people carry burdens you cannot see. Sometimes misunderstandings grow because no one asks the questions that matter. Listen before you judge. Choose compassion before anger. And never underestimate the power of saying, "I'm here." Because one phone call, one conversation, one act of forgiveness can change not only a single life, but generations to come. Thank you for letting me share my story. And if there's someone you've been meaning to call, maybe today is the day. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another emotional story. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced the power of forgiveness or a second chance, we'd love to read your story. Remember, life is too short to let misunderstandings keep us apart from the people we love. Take care of yourself, cherish your family, and we'll see you in the next heartfelt story.